Well, and that's exactly it, and that's why I'm happy that you mentioned that. Like when you kind of mentioned that Denzel Ward is kind of the new age corner, and that Richard Sherman is more in that not prior generation. Because if Richard's listening to this, I don't want him angry at you or I. So you don't want to call Richard Sherman old, but I absolutely agree with you. I think that for people who've been watching NFL football for decades, and they know that some of the cornerbacks in the past were bigger, more physical, more aggressive at the point of attack. I mean, certainly if you go back into the 60s and the 70s, I mean, some of the corners that played way back in the day were, I mean, that's what the game was, is you just simply didn't allow receivers off the line of scrimmage, and then you didn't have to worry about it. You could almost mug them down the field. And so that's one of the things that I think is fascinating is, like with you, Scott, the fact that you've worked with so many different coaches, so many different schemes and philosophies. Can you just kind of talk about how that there are different types of teams out there looking for different types of corners? And, I would just kind of give you an example. As you mentioned before, Denzel Ward. I mean, just his quickness, his change of direction, I mean, is just remarkable in my mind. And then you see guys like Sherman, we talked about, but some of the other, corners, Al Harris back in Green Bay, guys like that just had such long arms, and you weren't able to get off the line of scrimmage against them. They, even if they were beaten in terms of if you were able to get past them or around them, those long arms could just kind of snake around the receiver and bat the ball away, or things of that nature. So as we're shifting more to some of these smaller wide receivers, quicker wide receivers, in your opinion, do you think that you're going to see more of the bigger corners that are going to try and be as physical, or do you think that it is kind of a reflection of the fact that the NFL has changed so much, the rules are more in favor of offense, that corners are now going to be guys who maybe are 6 foot or less, but have that terrific change of direction and speed, and that's what's going to be required to play in the NFL?
Well, let me go back to when you first started talking about the old school 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
My father was 6'2". Willie Brown was 6'2". My dad invented the bump and run, and they just stoned everybody coming off the line of scrimmage. Yeah. My dad had to cover Lance Allworth, and he said, why let him run 5 yards before I touch him?
Yeah.
So that's I have many stories about my father and Willie Brown, how good they were and all that, about pressing and using their hands.
Yeah.
Nowadays you can do it still, but you get these little guys, not little guys, but undersized guys from a league standpoint, not being 6'3", not being the Julio Jones type guys. You're getting the quickness. And so what do? Do you play man and press? And if you miss on the press, boom, they're gone.
Yeah.
Now you're putting your safety in a bad situation. But if you're playing off and you're playing more cover 2 type stuff, then you can survive better because, it's not so much 1 versus 1, it's 2 versus 1.
Yep.
And, and the thing is, I mean, playing corner no matter what. I don't care when it was back in the day in the 60s and 70s or playing today, you're going to get beat. You're going to get beat, and there's no doubt about it. That's just part of the game. But these kids are coming out now that are so quick and so fast, and the ball comes out so quick from the quarterbacks that it's just like, okay, what do we do? Okay, well, he's going to catch it. He's going to get open. Just make the tackle. And I think that's where it's at.
No, I agree with you. I think that is where it's at. I think that's where the NFL is going now, is that I'm always going to have a soft spot in my heart for the big physical corners. I mean, I've watched Seattle be so successful in what Pete Carroll has brought here, and I still think that is the way that you should be able to play the game. But you hit right there when you said about the quarterbacks getting the ball out so quick that it's just you do need, everything is quicker now. And so that's what I think is kind of fascinating about this whole process, is that you are looking for a different type of player at the cornerback position than maybe you would have been looking at even just a couple of years ago. And not every team, again, Seattle, they got they're starting one guy in Shaquille Griffin, who's a second-year player, and then the other guy, Trey Flowers, is a converted safety who's starting as a fifth-round pick rookie. And they're having some success. I mean, I think they're in the top 5 statistically in the NFL right now with their defense, which is pretty remarkable considering all the turnover they've had. But they're a little unique. Not every team, of course, is going to play that style, and they have still been vulnerable to those smaller, shifty or wide receivers that are becoming so popular in today's NFL. The Hollywood Brown type of receivers that are going all throughout college and things like that. Before we talk a little bit more about that, you mentioned your dad, and you mentioned Lance Alworth, you mentioned Willie, his working with Willie Brown. Do you remember your dad talking about any of the receivers that he found particularly troublesome? Was it Lance Alworth, or was there other receivers that either he enjoyed going up against or that he was especially, worried about going up against just because they did give him problems?
Well, the main one was Lance Alworth. Yeah. He says he was incredible. Now in practice, he'd go against Fred Blinkenkoff.
Yeah.
And said, it wasn't so much the speed or the quickness. It was just the route running ability, the preciseness they had in their ball skills.
Yeah.
Lights out. But the one he always told me was Lance Alworth. He said he was incredible to cover. And my dad was all pro.
Yeah.
67, and Willie Brown was in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And my dad would follow Lance around the field. He was the corner.
Huh.
And yeah. But I'm sure there's more names. I guarantee there is.
Yeah.
But it's changed so much because back then the Raiders had 2 corners that were both 6'2".
Yep.
And would press and battle, and both could run. And nowadays, if you get a 6'2" corner, you're happy. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's like Richard Sherman we talked about.
Yeah.
But the game's changed so much from the standpoint of what you can do, physicality to the receiver.
Yeah.
So these corners are like, okay, I'm going to play man press. I'm going to play man off. I'm going to play zone. Okay. So if you get my right hand on his shoulder, they're going to call pass interference. Back when it was rocking and rolling, the NFL, from the old school stuff.
Yeah.
You could battle. It was still, don't get me wrong, they had certain penalties they'd call no matter what. But nowadays, it's like if you even sniff touching them after 5 yards, it's going to be either holding or pass interference.
No, exactly. Especially if you're the home team trying to make a drive, it does feel like there's a few more pass interference calls or holding calls that kind of show up if that's the case. It's kind of funny. I mean, we started off the show talking about Alabama, LSU, and of course I mentioned Greedy Williams, who is my personal top corner in the country, potentially eligible for the 2019 draft. He's only a redshirt sophomore. I'm very, very high on Washington's Byron Murphy. He's my number 9 rated prospect overall. And I have him higher, actually, than Justin Herbert, the quarterback at Oregon, who a lot of people out there are touting as a top 10 pick. And there's no doubt he's talented, but I just think that Byron Murphy, at least right now, is the better player. I'm a big fan of Deandre Baker, corner from Georgia as well. Those are 3 corners, Scott, who I think are going to go in the first round this year. I think there's lots of others, some second round kind of guys I have more in that second round. Julian Love for Notre Dame be another one that I think is right there on the cusp of potentially being in that at that level. And that's the thing, is there's some very young players, and so I do think that when you have that type of athletic ability, it's fairly obvious. And that's, I remember the first time I saw Marshon Lattimore, of course, who had the big year a year ago for the Saints, and just his ability to change directions. And then the same thing with Denzel Ward. Of course, Ward didn't see a lot of starting action at Ohio State because he was playing behind Lattimore and Garyon Conley and everybody else at Ohio State. But even as a nickel corner, you could see the change of direction, things like that. And then when he became a starter this past season for Ohio State, again, just the change of direction. I mean, it's the guys who I call it sweet feet. If they've got those sweet feet, then nothing else really matters, it seems like, almost anymore, because they can basically just kind of cover a guy. And so that leads me to what I've always thought of as being one of the real cliches in football, and that being this idea of a cover corner or a shutdown corner. In your mind, is there such a thing? Do you believe that there are guys who are that athletic, and who would you list as being some of the best cover corners or shutdown corners that you've ever seen at the college level or NFL?
Well, the thing about it is shutdown, cover corner is the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, what you look for, especially if you take one early in draft, is the fact that he can take for sure a third of the field away, maybe half a field away, because then what you can do is double the other side, safeties over the top, and know that you have a corner that, you know, I mean, it's obvious. Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
I mean, he would just lock it down and be like, okay, whatever receiver I'm covering, he's not going to be in the play.
Yeah.
You know, but they're few and far between. But from the lockdown in a cover corner, it's the same kind of stuff. It's just means you got a really good corner because, you know, the receivers get paid to play in the NFL too, and the quarterbacks get paid to make plays. And, you know, it's going to happen. Like I said, Deion Sanders has been beat, you know.
Yeah.
But he's going to win more than he loses. But what it does, not just from the standpoint of the corners, it affects your entire defense. You know, it affects the fact, can you be more aggressive blitzing? Can you be more aggressive bringing, you know, with the safeties over the top from the one side of the field compared to the other side of the field? It's huge. It's huge. But they're so hard to find. I'm telling you, you know, I've been doing this a long time, and it's not like every year a guy comes out, you know. And like you said with Denzel, he's a rookie, and he's played well so far.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But he's not a lockdown corner. He's quick. He's fast. He's instinctive as all get out.
Yeah.
He's not big, you know, but he's a good football player. And when you get guys like that, you know, you understand they're not Richard Sherman, Brandon, you know, type size. But they can make plays. But the key thing is you got to put them in a situation where they can have success. You know, and it's, you know, there's been a lot of corners that I've watched that are really good. Like Marshon,
yeah,
you know, was a really good player. Really good player. He can play whatever, 10 years, whatever it was. He could play press. He could play off.
Yep.
You know, and that's hard to find. It's very hard to find.
No, it is, and you mentioned Deion. I mean, that's the player that jumps out as for me as well. Just like I said, the sweetest feet that I'd ever seen at the cornerback position, the acceleration. That's the thing. You see some players who have that great quickness. They have those loose hips. They can just kind of churn any direction and accelerate. But he had not only that, but he had the straight line speed as well. You know, he had Denzel Ward 4.3, 4.2 type of speed. I mean, just ridiculous speed. And so that to me is one of the things that made him such a unique player. Now, of course, you probably remember Scott. He wasn't the most physical player. You know, a lot of guys that do have that type of speed. That's been some of the knocks on some of the guys that have come out. But so I want to kind of just mention a couple of the players that I've seen over the last, say, 10 years or so that I thought had the sweetest feet. Now, some of them have not gone on to become really, you know, incredible NFL players, not Pro Bowl players. But one of the very first guys who I just remember watching a kind of a random Big Ten game and watching this guy just the way he moved. And I thought, oh, that's an NFL corner right there. And that's Tracy Porter, who I remember back at Indiana. And again, not a real physical player. And he didn't go into the NFL and become an all-pro type of player. But I just remembered watching him, just the pure coverage skills. that really jumped out at me. And then you mentioned Marcus Trufant. Of course, that's kind of my neck of woods.